Welcome to Pods with Posh and Paul, a podcast designed to inspire and challenge listeners through story, experience and insight. To face adversity, learn from suffering and discover how to embrace life with a heart filled with love and gratitude. We are so thrilled to have you journey with us and can't wait to share your stories. Join Sue O'Callaghan and Joanne Webb as we disrupt the theory that everyone has perfect lives.
Hi, welcome into our Pods with Posh and Pool tribe. Today we have with us Craig Johns, who is also known as the Active CEO and Chief Energy Officer. He has over 25 years of global experience working in the sport, health, mind, education and hospitality industries, where he has thrived on helping people become high-performing leaders. It was after being hospitalised 3 times with stress-related heart problems and burnout, which included flatlining in the emergency room, that Craig realised he could no longer work 70-hour weeks. And for his mental and physical health, things needed to change radically. He needed to be more than a leader of high performance and become a high-performing leader. Craig learnt how to work smarter, not harder, and has now transferred those strategies into working with CEOs, senior execs, coaches and leaders from some of the world's leading companies on breaking the CEO code. Craig is the host of the Active CEO podcast, a keynote speaker, leadership performance expert, and is currently authoring Breaking the CEO Code. One of his favourite quotes: "We are all custodians of the human race. It is our role as influencers to leave the world in a better place. What mark are you going to leave on the world, where the ordinary don't belong?" We are so pleased to welcome Craig Johns. Hi, Craig.
Hi, it's great to be on your show.
Craig, you've got a really interesting story. You're a speaker, you're a CEO, you're a coach, you're a podcaster. You've got many strings to your bow, really. But back in 2013, you hit rock bottom, really, didn't you? So can you tell us a little bit what happened then?
Yeah, so I was living in Thailand, a beautiful place over there. Had an amazing facility that I was working at where it's a world leader in sport, mind, health, education, hospitality. And we were dealing with everyone from complete beginners and families right through to your Olympic champions. And just a phenomenal place to be involved in with some world leading people, like Dalai Lama in kind of the mind space. We're dealing with some of the top Olympic and world champions in the sports space. Education, emotional, social learning. So incredible place. We even had our own organic farm. So you can imagine the food was quite amazing as well. What was really interesting there is I'm someone who's all or nothing. So I'm either in or I'm out. And so I came into an environment where we are starting, it was a startup, $150 million US startups with 500 staff. So quite an ambitious project. For me, every day was really exciting. Every conversation was amazing. However, I got caught very quickly into falling into the passion trap. And I was working 70 to 80 hours a week and ended up going consistently for 302 days straight. So you can imagine over that time that the energy will continue to drop and performance drops over time because you're not giving your body a chance to kind of recover from that. So I woke up one morning and was heading towards the bathroom and fainted. And I went out for around 5 minutes. And when I woke up, my wife was beside me and she had never seen me in that state. So, but there I was lying and I couldn't move. So I had no energy. Once I got up, I fainted again for another couple of minutes. And so they rushed me off to hospital. My heart rate's racing. It's going all over the place. It's going up over 240 beats a minute and then it'll drop below sort of 30. So like a big roller coaster. And so obviously you're not getting enough blood to the brain and all you want to do is faint and you have no energy. 3 weeks I stayed in a state of the heart rate was not consistent. And so there was quite a big risk of stroke and even death as well once you get past about 10 days in that kind of uncontrolled state of heart irregularities. And so I kind of got to this point where I'm just sitting here going, you know what, you've stopped doing all the things that you know is really good for performance. And you've done a lot as an athlete and a coach and sports scientist over the last 20 odd years but you forgot to do it. And all you were doing was focused on everyone else and ensuring that you created this amazing product and place to be at. And so while I was sitting there, I'm like, you know what, I can't keep doing this. I put on 14 kgs in the last year. I'm not exercising. I'm not eating healthy, even though I was at one of the healthiest places in the world. and I definitely wasn't freeing my mind. And so in that moment, I was like, you know what, I've got to change. I need to utilize those skills I'd learned earlier, and I need to actually just start taking care of myself, because it was affecting other people. It was affecting my family. It was affecting my team, and they needed me there to be in a great performance state.
Craig, can I ask you a personal question? How old were you at the time when this happened, when you collapsed?
So 35.
So you were really young, and you'd been a high performance athlete. You'd been a triathlete, hadn't you? You know, you'd represented your country, and you were up there, you were super fit. You know the ingredients it takes to perform well. And there you were, you find yourself in Thailand, one of the most beautiful places, helping other people, yet your recipe wasn't quite right.
Yeah, that's right. So for me, then it was, I needed to, what I termed as breaking the CEO code. And so I realized I needed to make sure that I started putting exercise in daily. I needed to make sure I was eating properly. I needed to make sure that I was actually planning recovery in there. And that is something a lot of people don't do. If we look at high performers, if we look at athletes, we look at, they will plan their recovery and then the performance around that. The performance actually comes when you are resting. And so I needed to figure out how I did that more effectively. So I started putting things in place. And so one of the key things is called CEO periodization. Periodization comes initially from libraries and cataloging books into different periods of time. Then in the athlete world, it's the balance of stress load and then a recovery. So it's periodizing stress loads with recovery so that your performance can continue to rise over a long period of time.
So for our listeners there, Craig, can we just explain what the CEO stands for?
Yeah, so CEO can help in two different ways. So great question. So initially it was designed for CEOs because, you know, I felt there was we're seeing a lot of burnout in that space. But then I realized that it's suitable for anyone. It doesn't matter if you're a parent, if you're a student, if you're a teacher, it could be anything. So that stands for Chief Energy Officer, because everything in life comes down to energy. You need to control the energy that goes in, and you need to look after the energy that comes out. And so that's where the CEO periodization starts to come into play. And you can do that on a daily basis right through to a career base. And so I started putting things in place where I started to plan recovery, and it's all based around a 3-to-1 work to rest ratio. So say if we look at a month, then 3 weeks can be relatively full on. They can have lots of meetings, travel, some intense discussions. But then the 4th week needs to be a recovery week. So what I would tend to do is plan no meetings, plan no travel, reduce the number of hours I worked so that I could recharge and then go again the next month.
So to implement that in our lifestyle, I'm just relating it to listeners here. We've got listeners that might be teachers, that might be parents at home with young children. We're podcasters. How do we implement that, and what does that look like over that 4-week period?
Yeah, I think the first thing you've got to do is actually look at, okay, what things do I currently have planned? You might just get a simple graph of, say, a month. We'll use a month to start with. Break it into 4 1-week blocks. And then you just start to map out, okay, when do I have key meetings? When are key projects due? When do I need to be at school? Say if you're a teacher, when do I need to be at school events? So plug those in first and then start to look at, okay, well, when are the key ones? All right, then I now need to schedule in my rest time. So I know that week might be a little bit more reduced in the amount of hours of work. I make sure I don't add any projects that week. I don't have any parent meetings. So you just schedule that around. Now, sometimes it may not be an easy as going, all right, 3 weeks, 1 week. But we can look at, say if you need to go 5 weeks in a row, then you might have 10 days or 2 weeks of a recovery period.
I suppose it's taken us back to the old basic life, because we used to have weekends free, didn't we? That's basically what we used to have. 5 days that were pretty full on and 2 days of rest and recovery. Yeah. And we don't have that in this day and age anymore. So basically what you're trying to do is you're trying to bring some balance back into people's life, aren't you? So to give them this formula, which they can actually look at graph-wise, because there's people who are very, very visual, and that really helps them, isn't it? And just showing them that you can't be on the go 24/7. It will kill you. It's as simple as that. So let's bring it back and try to bring a little bit of calm in every now and again.
Yeah, it's not something you can be reactive about. And that's the way most people take it. Because the problem is, unless you are putting a massive amount of stress on your body or you have a catastrophic event, you're not really going to notice the change in energy and performance. So say an athlete, for instance, an athlete's really easy to showcase this. An athlete, if they get the amount of stress load, whether it's too much speed or they go too long in training, they will notice it in the next session because they will feel the fatigue. They won't be able to go as fast, won't be able to go potentially as long. So there's a real clear trigger. Now, when we're in the working space, we don't have the clear triggers unless we have that catastrophic event that happens, such as COVID-19, right? So that was a catastrophic event that caused a big trigger, and then we went into kind of a mode of, all right, how is our body feeling? Well, we're exhausted right now, or no, we've got a bit of energy so we can push on. So it's important we proactively do that. Otherwise, our energy and our performance slowly decreases, and the body's so clever at adapting, and we just don't recognize it's happening. So it'll constantly adapt. And then finally, when we take a couple of days off or we have a holiday, so for a lot of people, they will go 11 months straight and then have some sort of summer holiday. They quite often will find themselves sick in the first couple of days. And it's the body's way of going, you know what? I like this recovery. I'm now going to punish you because you haven't been looking after yourself. So I'm going to hold you down for a little bit. I might let you come up for a bit of air, and then you push a little bit too hard again and it throws you back down there. So it's the body's very clever at telling you when you've gone way too far, but it's not so good at giving you the signs along the way.
What you're really doing is looking at building strategy into life, into business, into structure. And obviously you had that strategy experience from your athlete experience, from being a triathlete, from competing. How do you see strategy in performance and leadership having its role? What influence does that have?
It has to start from the top. It's like any sort of change, any sort of behavior, it needs to be role modeled from the top. So, we've looked at the reason I've gone down breaking the CEO code is that if we start at the bottom, it'll only go so far until people want to move up the chain of command or want to move up to a higher position, and then they're caught in the space of, well, to do that, I need to model the same behaviors that I'm seeing from our leaders. So if they're not role modeling the right behaviors, it's very difficult for the ones that are coming up through the system or through the employee ranks to actually be able to make changes themselves and not feel that threat of, okay, am I going to be seen to being too lazy here? Am I going to be seen to doing the wrong thing? So it's a real challenge, and there's a lot of industries like that. And that's why we've gone to the key influencers and starting at the top with the CEOs, or it might be an entrepreneur, or it might be a community leader. They're the key ones that we need to start with.
And so that's the periodizing side of your leadership performance formula. So if we can plan in some downtime, some not so crazy busy time, that really helps us with our recovery. And then, so what's the next level? What do we do next?
So CEO presence. So quite often you'll see people, and we're probably all guilty of this at times, where we waltz into a meeting, we're not prepared, we don't think about how we're actually going to approach the meeting or the situation if it's a one-on-one from a performance point of view. So we don't think about how we are going to turn up, what type of energy we want to bring, what type of communication, whether that be verbal or non-verbal, what kind of preparation do we need to actually make sure that meeting or that interaction is actually effective. So it's around about what sort of focus we have, what our intention is, making sure that we are self-aware and situationally aware of our non-verbals as well as our verbal communication. If we take Lisa Alexander, she's the Diamonds netball coach for Australia. Before she ever delivers any messages that might be some sort of negative type message, she would have practiced it by herself in the shower. She would have practiced it with someone else. And it wasn't just the words, it was the delivery. She needed to ensure that the message come across the correct way. So there's aspects of presence here around the verbal and non-verbal communication. There's aspects around the intention that we bring. And then there's also around ensuring that we have a really strong objective and ensure that everyone knows what's coming. Quite often we'll see people waltz into a meeting and they will just open their diary, for instance, or they pull open the paper and start reading it, and they haven't actually done the work. Now that will switch off the other people in the meeting pretty quick. Subconsciously, they recognize what's going on, that this person is not prepared and isn't bringing the energy and the intention to the room.
And when you talk about intention, I assume you're talking about the integrity, your authenticity, being congruent with your message, but also it's about the outcome, isn't it? What is actually the outcome that you want from being present or having that conversation, communicating? What is the outcome? It's looking at the end goal that you want to achieve.
Yeah, it's in clarity around it. So I think that's really important, because quite often we will go into these situations where they don't know what the outcome is going to be. And I think we're finding a lot right now where we seem to be on Zoom calls constantly at the moment. And it seems like we're meeting all the time. And it's like, well, why are we in these meetings? And there's so many of them that we can get ourselves caught up in. So what is the intention of it? Why are we there? And how can we decrease the amount of time?
Yeah, I love your message, because you say as a chief energy officers of our lives, we've got to remember our energy affects others as well as ourselves. And it's so true, because also when we do go into a meeting and we're prepared, the whole meeting just flows so much better. That even if it's 5 minutes of preparation, 10 minutes, it depends on obviously the type of meeting. Some will take longer, but when you go in and you're not prepared, you're right, you're a bit flummoxed, you don't know what to say, everything, you think you can wing things sometimes, but actually that's probably not the way to go, especially when you're talking about like the CEO. But equally, every day with layman's terms, even if you want to go and have a chat to your children, be prepared about what you want to talk to them about, because if you just go in without really thinking about it and without much presentation and without thinking about what energy you want to give away, things can come across wrong, and then that's often sometimes where conflict starts. So be present, think about every transaction.
Yeah, it's fully being present, and it's being present in the situation you're in, and especially if we take the current situation where you're in remote working space, it's quite easy to have every part of your life overlap at one time. If you've got young children who are doing homeschool or young and are walking through the house, how they affect your intention or where your focus is right now, it can get distracted really easily. And if you don't switch that presence to the people in the room or to the situation quickly, then you can say the wrong thing and it may come across the wrong way, or you may gesture incorrectly, can have a massive impact.
You can fill your life with a heck of a lot of noise, can't you? And then you can't see the wood for the trees. And so our message to our listeners, we're always talking about impacting mental health. And I think everything you're doing for CEOs or anybody else who's interested in this is all about your mental health, really, isn't it? Because we can't cope doing everything all ourselves. We can't, we do need to look after our mind, body, soul to be the best performer we can possibly be. And so all of these strategies are really helping people with their mental health, aren't they?
Yes. So the heart and soul of everything I do is energy.
Yeah.
And so it's how do we look after mental energy, physical energy, emotional energy, and that all comes down to being proactive around it. You can't, if you're already in a reactive state, you've probably said the wrong thing, made a decision that was incorrect that you could have prevented. So it's how do we switch that around? And the mental aspect is so important. We, as we were talking about before, we don't notice that energy and performance dropping, and it's so gradual. We don't recognize it until it's too late. And that's the real challenge when we look at, say, high performance outside of the athletic space. Because the athletic space, they notice the physical fatigue, which prevents them going too far generally with mental. Doesn't always, but it can.
Yeah.
Whereas in the workspace, you don't have that physical sense in most cases, unless you're on a really physical job. And so the mental side is the one that will creep down and it will catch you when you least expect it.
Yes.
And as you say, we are mind, body, spirit. We're three parts. If we go back to your days of being a high performance athlete and then translate that into your episodes where you ended up in hospital to where you are today, what is the biggest lesson you took from that transition, that transformation in your life? What was the biggest lesson when you were in maybe more of your soul space in hospital, realizing you needed to create change? What lesson did you take from that which has enabled you and empowered you where you're at today?
Yeah, so from that, I knew I just needed to prioritize really effectively. And so some of the things I took out of that, which made a massive difference. So when you're talking about 500 staff, you're talking 10 different companies under one, you're talking 20 plus nationalities. So you've got a lot of different things going on at one time. So what I ended up doing was restricting my emails to twice a day. Because what you find when you've got a lot of people on, especially when you have group emails, someone sends a group email at the beginning of the day, it will be solved by the end of the day. So unless you need to step in as a leader or anyone involved in that, unless you actually need to step in to stop them from catastrophically failing along the way, you let them solve it. They will come up with they already have generally the solutions to their problems or their issue. So let them solve it. And then it gives them ownership on it, and they will start to take a better leadership role inside, their role that they have within the organization or within a community. So that was really important. So that actually reduced my emails from about 120 plus per day back to 20 to 30. And so I was only emailing the really important ones. So that was one aspect. The other one is I ensure that I put back in exercise once per day. Sometimes I'll do 2. And, I like doing 2 personally, but I just made sure I had 1. I made sure that I changed the way I was eating. It was difficult where we were because I would have generally meetings for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So it was a fairly full-on week. And because it's buffet, and because in my position I didn't have to pay for anything, you just tended to keep eating. It was such good food. And even though it was healthy, it was more food in or more energy in than I was energy out. So the balance wasn't there. So therefore I kept putting on weight, even though it was healthy food. So calories in, calories out. I then started making sure that I actually had a cutoff time each day. And I went back to what were triggers in my life that I had used before that allowed me to step out from work and then into more of a relaxation or a home life or a social life. So when I used to work at Taipei American School, it was always the gate, the clang of the gate as I went through it. And that was an automatic switch in my head to go either you're on if you're going in or off when you're going out. And so I had to find that when I was working in Thailand. So what I did is I just used the gate, the rattle of the gate as we drove across it. And that was my trigger then to go, okay, you're now off.
Mm-hmm. And again, we're looking at creating a balance in our life, aren't we? Taking ownership. We're looking at diet, we're looking at exercise, we're looking at restricting the amount of social media or the email that we're looking at use on the internet. It's having a healthy balance comes back again and again and again. Mind, body, spirit, are all 3 in alignment? Are all 3 balanced? Are we negating responsibility in one area?
Yeah, I think it's really important. It's hard to keep those balances right. So, for me, the 4 foundations of performance for anyone are exercise, nutrition, freeing your mind, then recovering with purpose. And so those 4 key aspects, it doesn't matter what you do in life. If you don't have some sort of balance with those 4 things, you are limits on how high you can go in your own performance. So your natural talent will set your ceiling, your minimum ceiling height, your natural talent. How you move that ceiling up, so if you can raise the roof, so to speak, comes down to those 4 basic things. Yeah. So cognitive ability, your mood, your motivation, et cetera, all come down to those 4 basic things as being key movers. They can move or key levers of how high you can keep raising that talent or that roof. So it doesn't matter how good you are. If you're not doing those, you will not keep progressing. And I think that's really important to understand. So
you can look after all of those things for 80% of the time. The other 20% doesn't really matter, because we can't keep a hold of those things all the time, can we? Because life is about balance, like we say, and sometimes the balance goes off, and that's okay too. It's a bit like a seesaw. So if you can try and keep 80 under control for 80% of the time, you don't have to worry about when you're out of balance for the other 20.
Yeah, you've got to have some freedom in your life and to let things happen. And I think that takes it into, say, the 3rd phase of the leadership performance level or being a high-performing leader is CEO performance. And this is all about looking at your habits. And quite a big part of this is around relationships. And this is where balance comes into play, because relationships are so crucial. It doesn't have to be a wife or a husband or children or family. It's social. It's also your work relationships. And it's how you're able to balance those well. So for instance, one of the things we look at with regards to CEO performance is around contamination. For instance, quite often people will take their work when they come into the house, they'll bring their laptop or their bag and their phone, they'll stick it on the dining room table. They have now contaminated a space. They've taken work and they have subconsciously now put it on the dining table and in the lounge. So one of the things that I find really effective is that when you come in, you find a place in the house where it's either a cupboard where you put your work bag, or it's an office space that you have and you go in and place it in there. Because now you have then set a boundary. It's like, okay, this is my space for working. This is the space where I'm not working. Now, my wife and I are both working from home at different times. And I'm not sure if you've talked about the love languages, the 5 love languages before.
Mm-hmm.
My love language is acts of service. So I love it when people do things, or I do things for people. That's my key one. Hers is physical touch and being around people. So we don't actually need to be talking, but she just likes being next to me. So there are certain times where if I need to do extra work, I'll sit on the couch, I'll take the laptop and I'll work next to her, but we're very clear that I'm in workspace now. If we then want to have a discussion, I will close the laptop, put it back in the office, and then we'll have the discussion. So I have now separated work from our relationship, and it's so important. And I think one other way that I think is important for people, especially now where we can seem to hold our life in our hand and a phone, is around digital and where your digital zones are and not. So two things on this one. One is we don't have digital in the bedroom. That's one simple way of doing it. And even if you need an alarm clock, then go find a digital alarm clock, for instance, if you don't like the ticking of the old the old school clocks, and have that there, because at least and generally cover it so there's no lighting in the room. And then at least there's no sense of your emails being there, or social media, or a notification. Even if you turn your phone off and put it in your room, subconsciously you'll still be on to there could be a notification coming through. So they've actually done scientific work on this. So we always make sure they're plugged in and they're recharging in the lounge. So the phone gets to recharge in the lounge and we get to recharge in the bedroom. The other aspect to that is having a digital sunrise and sunset. So what time of day in the morning are you allowed to turn your digital components on, whether it's your phone or your TV, etc.? What is that start time? And then what is your end time? Because if you don't, you can end up being on digital. We can be digitally on for up to, for some people, 12, 14, 16 hours a day. And that's a lot for your brain, because it just constantly, the one thing that, scrolling does, or being on a blue screen, or being on a laptop or whatever it does, is that your brain continues to keep working. Now, our brains aren't designed to continually work. They will fry. It's like trying to run a Formula One car, and try and run it for 12 hours every day, day after day. It's not going to last. It probably won't even last one day.
And I think whether you're in business or whether you're in family, whether you've got children at home, the messages are about restricting and about finding that balance, coming back all the time to that place of balance. Before we leave, what is one key message you'd like to leave to our listeners? Bearing in mind that you say we're all influencers, we're all CEOs. What's one message you'd like to leave our listeners today?
Yeah, for me, we are all custodians of the human race. It's our role as influencers to leave the world in a better place. So I want to know, what is the mark you're leaving on the world? What is that difference you're going to make to ensure that the human race can continue in a better world?
I love it. It's a really nice message, and thank you so much. And we will give our listeners all the information of where to find you, where they can check you out, because your message is a great one. So thank you so much for your time today, Craig. It's been an absolute pleasure.
You're welcome, Sue and Joanna. It's been I really enjoyed the conversation, and it's great to see some familiar Kiwis online. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for being with us today. For us to inspire others to live their magnificently imperfect life, please subscribe and leave us a 5-star review on iTunes or on your podcast app. You can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Pods with Posh and Pool. We can't wait for you to join us on our next episode. Love, light and peace.